Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the Transportation Mini-Series training. This is part one of three different mini-series trainings that Centralina Area Agency on Aging is offering. My name is Laurie Abinader, and it's my pleasure to walk you through this training session as we start to explore the idea of retiring from driving and many of the different facets that go into an individual's plan to retire from driving. One of the first responses that we might get is, why would anyone ever plan to retire from driving? Many people might say, I will never give up my car keys. It's too important to me to be able to drive. Or, driving is my key to my independence, and I can't give up driving. But in reality, many different issues can affect our ability to drive. Some of these issues, but not all, become more common with age. If you stop for a moment and think about someone who's young, who perhaps breaks their arm and is not able to drive while their arm is in a cast, that might be an issue that someone couldn't drive. And someone who is older may not be able to drive based on a medical condition. So, as you'll see, some of the issues we're going to talk about today affect the ability to drive, but those could be temporary. Others are more long lasting and sometimes permanent. What we do know is that it's much easier for an individual to not be able to drive if they have planned ahead and made that transition, thought through that transition, and come up with some alternatives to um, transportation so that they can still get around and go where they want to go. What another consideration is that we know that driving past the point of being safe can have some devastating consequences. Transportation certainly is important to all of us. It links individuals to social connections, religious activities, employment, getting groceries, going shopping, and so much more. So while we are not going to discount the idea of driving and transportation being incredibly important, we also want to explore what some of those options are that someone could use so that they don't have to continue driving and can still go out and get where they want to go. Let's look first at some of the facts about older adult drivers. We know that older adult drivers tend to be very safe drivers compared to drivers of other age groups. We also know that medical conditions and medications can affect one's driving ability, and that these abilities do tend to increase with age. For example, processing speed and coordination decreases with age. As we've already mentioned, medication use can increase with age, and different medications can impair driving ability. Also, another consideration is that older drivers tend to sustain injuries from automobile crashes more easily, and they are more frail, which reduces their odds of recovering from an injury sustained in an automobile accident. So, these are just some of the considerations we want to think through. Some other considerations include the fact that in most cases, an older adult driver can expect to outlive his or her ability to drive by about 6 to 10 years. And most older adults desire to age in place and remain living in their home or community setting, which sometimes driving and using a vehicle is about the only way to get around. So that's an important consideration for a lot of folks who think that if they don't have car keys, they're not going to be able to get around in their community. Another consideration is that adults generally equate driving with preserving their independence and their autonomy. Research suggests that men spend the last 7 years of their life as non-drivers, and women experience about a full decade reliant on other modes of transportation. And women and minorities tend to stop driving somewhat earlier than men. Some of the driving warning signs that we know are listed here. While I'm not going to go through each one of these, and certainly there may be more that you might be able to think of, but the driving warning signs that we know include sensory changes, getting lost on familiar roads that once an individual would never have gotten lost on, having issues with driving too fast or too slow, or obeying some of the speed limit signs, cutting off other drivers, having trouble turning into a parking lot, having trouble turning left, having mysterious dents or scratches on the car where we're not sure where they came from. And of course, cognitive issues, cognitive changes like ones that might be experienced from dementia or a stroke are also an issue to consider as well. Some of the potential consequences of ignoring those warning signs would include, of course, the safety of the driver, the safety of the pedestrians or the passengers that are with the driver, the liability that may be involved if that individual were to face a lawsuit for driving once they were not safe to be driving. And also the emotional toll of potentially harming other people or harming other person's property, and what that might entail as a consequence. It's important that we stop and think about what some of these consequences might be if an individual were to drive past the point of being safe while doing so. I think all of us have heard or seen news media footage of an individual whose car crashed into a building. Perhaps they had a medical emergency or their foot they got confused maybe as to which one was the gas pedal and which one was the brake pedal. And this is something, that we see quite a bit more than we used to. There's we know that certainly that accidents can happen and they can happen at any age at all. But when an older adult causes an accident that we perceive as being an avoidable accident, that's when our red flags might raise and we wonder, is this a sign that we need to stop driving or reduce driving, limit driving, or something along those lines? The possibilities of unsafe driving, of course, can be quite grim, and we don't want to dwell on that. Instead, let's take a shift at this point and talk about those things that we can control when it comes to driving safely. So, a big part of that is coming up with a driving plan. And what we're going to see next, we're going to watch a short video and then look at some of the ways that that we can look at planning ahead to stop driving or limit driving. One of those ways would be when an individual imposes their own driving limits or driving restrictions, or when someone takes the time to assess their own driving safety or driving ability, taking classes to sharpen those driving skills, or creating a driver planning agreement and starting that conversation about when should I really look at stopping driving or reduce my driving. So first, let's look at this quick video. It's only a 2-minute video, but it does do a good job of capturing that idea behind how difficult it can be to look at stopping driving and maybe paint a different perspective for us here.
Our generation, we were rebels. We broke the rules. We made change.
We made history, and we're all about peace, love, and rock and roll.
Oh, how we loved our cars. They were fast and loud. We went wherever the wind blew us.
Even when we grew up and had kids, we were the youngest generation for our age. We refused to grow old.
We're still the life of the party.
We're still making our mark.
So the key is to stay one step ahead on this journey. Plan for retirement.
Live large and check those things off your bucket list.
Be safe, but don't play it too safe.
And know when to take the high road, when to leave the driving to someone else.
I prefer to have a driver anyway.
We're lucky to be living in a time when technology can help us maintain our independence.
Ride sharing apps are here. Driverless cars are coming. There are more options now than ever before.
So just like you plan for retirement to live the life you want, having a transportation plan can help you get to the places that help you live that life you want. Fatal car crash rates can increase for those over 75, and even a fender bender could cause a disabling injury given aging bones and increased frailty. So give some thought to when you're ready to turn over your keys for your own safety and for the safety of others.
So create a transportation plan like I did.
I set my keys free.
I parked my car for good, but I'm still in the driver's seat.
I've got more places to go and people to see.
I'm just getting started.
Plan for the road ahead. See how to make your transportation plan at planfortheroadahead.org.
I think that's a great video, and it really focuses in on how technology can help and how older adults can really make their own plan and be in control of their plan for the future. We talked earlier about how imposing self-restrictions can be one early tool in beginning to limit our own driving. And some of those restrictions that we commonly hear about are when someone may choose to stop driving in rush hour traffic, or avoiding highways or very busy roads, not driving in bad weather, rain or snowy roads, taking short trips only and saving those longer trips or trips that require driving on the highway to someone else, driving after dark and usually just driving during daylight hours, or avoiding left turns or intersections that they perceive are more dangerous or risky. So that is something. Imposing a self-restriction sometimes is an early first step that an older adult might use. So let's look at another tool that someone could use, and this is using driver assessment tools. And there are many tools that are available out there. There are just a few listed here on this slide, but a driver assessment tool is really in place to help an individual assess their own driving skills, and then be able to use the results of that driver assessment to see if they need to put in place some type of modification to help them, or do some sort of limiting like we've already discussed, or if if perhaps there's a need to get professional involved. One of those is listed here, is working down at the bottom, is working with a driver rehabilitation specialist to assess skills and suggest interventions. There's a contact here, or a link to find a driver rehabilitation provider. There's a link there, as well as there are many other links on here to show all of the different types of driving assessment tools that are out there. So that's something to consider and share with others as well. In addition, there are lots of different types of safe driving classes. The AARP Smart Driver helps refresh driving skills. In some cases, it can save on auto insurance, depending on what state you live in. The CarFit driving class helps an individual figure out where they are most safe sitting in their vehicle. Are they better to sit closer, further up, or to push their seat back a little bit? Where should they position their steering wheel? Where should they position their mirrors, and that type of thing? And then lastly is the Smart Driver Tech program, where an individual can learn about the latest advances in technology. There are a lot of different new vehicle technology features that are out there in some of the newer cars, and this class goes over what those are. So that is helpful as well. The driver planning agreement we will talk about in depth in another one of our series mini trainings. But just very quickly, we'll mention that the driver planning agreement is something that can be used just as we plan or identify someone who can help us with our future healthcare decisions or financial decisions. A driver planning agreement identifies that individual who can help as a trusted person to help us make that important decision and transition from being a driver to stopping driving at the point that it becomes unsafe. So there are a handful of different types of driving planning agreements out there. This is just one example, and this is listed in the Centralina Transportation Guide, which we'll talk about in a minute. Having the conversation is a really important part of retiring from driving. And it's important that we realize that it is not an easy conversation. And whether you are the individual who starts the conversation as the concerned friend or family member, or if you are the older adult driver who is on the receiving end of that conversation, perhaps, there's a lot of emotion and worry that can go behind that. For example, family and friends might be worried about, I don't know how to start that conversation. And if I take away the keys from my loved one, it's going to hurt our relationship. Or I'm really too busy to drive mom around to everything she wants to go to. So maybe I'll just stay quiet and let her keep driving. Or I'm worried that dad's going to hurt someone when he's driving or hurt himself. The older adult driver, by contrast, is concerned perhaps about losing independence, becoming a burden to family and friends by being dependent on them for driving, worried that they're not going to get to go anywhere anymore, they're going to be stuck at home, or that paying for transportation is expensive. And also just that general worry, I have had some close calls out there on the road, and I'm not really sure if I should be driving to begin with. So when we have the conversation, it leads us to having more clear expectations about what is coming down the road, and to be able to prepare better for some of those potential negative effects, and to come up with some possibilities to avoid those negative effects as well. By exploring what our options are, we might be able to reduce that worry, and maybe navigate around some of those challenges that are keeping us from giving up the keys. When we have the conversation, there are some do's and don'ts that are pretty common that we hear about. Some of the do's include having multiple open conversations over time, and not just having one conversation and thinking that conversation is going to be the beginning and the end of thinking about retiring from driving. That it should really be an open conversation that leads into thinking about this and being able to have time to transition and prepare oneself. Also, we want to assure the driver that all alternatives will be explored. Rather than having to simply give up driving, maybe we need to get a physical therapist or occupational therapist involved to assess driving, and maybe they can come up with something to help that individual stay safe and continue driving a bit longer. Being able to practice on the early side using rideshare services like Lyft or Uber, or begin ordering online delivery such as grocery delivery or Amazon or Uber Eats, so that an individual can still benefit from those things that are important to them, like going out to eat or ordering their favorite clothing on Amazon or anything like that. Some of the do nots include don't threaten or give ultimatums to the older individual, and definitely don't take away their keys or hide the keys or disable the vehicle, because you never know when there might be an emergency and that individual is banking on being able to use their emergency use their vehicle during an emergency, we don't want to have them thinking that their vehicle is ready to go and then not be able to use it, and how frustrating that would certainly be for the individual. And we want to be able to preserve that trust between the two parties. And by disabling a vehicle or taking away the keys or hiding the keys, that's really not setting that situation up for continued trust. Here are some more resources about having that conversation. One idea is to seek outside support, such as from a physician or a counselor. We've already mentioned using a driver rehabilitation specialist. There are also some articles and some helpful information here, as far as there's a video about We Need to Talk, having conversations with older drivers. And then there's just some other toolkits that have information about starting that conversation. We've already talked just a bit about the Centralina Transportation Guide, and this is the front cover of it. This is what it looks like. And the Transportation Guide was designed to assist older adults and people with disabilities who are looking for transportation alternatives or transportation services. This is provided at no cost and is a resource and could be used by professionals, older adults, and their families or caregivers. The guide is available in both Spanish and English, and is available in a hard copy as well as online on our website. And if you work with groups of older adults, you can request copies that are available from Centralina as well. Let's take a look at some of the features that are in the transportation guide. One of them is the transportation needs checklist, which has the individual write down some of the key places that they go and how they tend to get there. And then what are my alternatives? What is a different way that I might be able to get there? Instead of driving to church, maybe getting a ride from a neighbor who attends the same church and riding together to church, as an example. But it is certainly important that we have the individual fill out the chart with the places they regularly go, including their medical appointments, social activities, hair salons, and things like that, so that they could start to think through some possible alternatives. The transportation needs checklist also includes jotting down here what the transportation options are and some of the services available in the area. Not every area has the same types of transportation services, and it's important to know what your area specifically has and offers. And that could be anything from a volunteer transportation program to public transit or paratransit, or anything in between, including rideshare services. And then here at the very bottom, putting down my personal transportation support. And that's the name of friends or families who are willing to give me a ride, and their phone number or contact information as well. So it's really kind of at your fingertips, where you'd be able to grab that information and keep a close look on what your transportation needs are. And if that changes, of course, this could be updated at any time. We also want to make sure folks think through considerations when they do plan a trip. So we've got some key considerations here on this slide. When someone plans a trip, let's say they use the public transportation or the paratransit that's offered in their area, some of the questions that they might want to ask are, how long am I going to have to wait for the bus to pick me up? Or how far in advance do I need to book my ride? When my doctor's appointment is finished, how long do I have to wait before the van picks me up? If I use a wheelchair or some other type of assistive device, are accessible vehicles available by this service? Or what is the cost of this service? Another important factor is, can my caregiver ride with me because I don't want to go to this appointment by myself? Or what is your coverage area? So these are all some key considerations, and this is explained in detail in the transportation guide as well. And the transportation guide also has listing of the different services, which I think we've already mentioned, but those are listed by county in the region that Centralina serves, plus a few additional counties that are close by. So in closing, as we finish up this portion of our transportation series, we want to think through some of what our main points were today. And it's important to remember that most individuals will experience at some point in their life either a temporary period which driving is not a safe alternative, or a longer period where they need to come up with some more permanent solutions or alternatives to driving. There are also steps that can be taken to ensure we are driving as safely as possible. So sometimes folks can use those steps to prolong their driving as much as they can to maintain that type of independence. But if they have to make a shift and retire from driving, that there are resources and tools that can be used to continue to maximize independence as much as possible, and still enjoy that quality of life as much as they can, even after retiring from driving. And lastly, it's so important to know that planning ahead and coming up with a transportation plan ahead of time really can give someone peace of mind and make that transition smoother and prevent getting into a crisis situation. And before we finish up, I did want to just bring your attention to Centralina's references and resources. And this is the link here, and it does link you to a document on our website that has, and this is actually a snippet of it. This is our transportation resource list, and it cites the source as well as some of the many resources that are out there, which may be like, for example, this one begins with AARP, and then it talks about the Safe Trip app, as well as the Smart Driver Defensive Driving course. So you might see here some things are paper handouts or a driving assessment test that someone can take themselves, or it might be a video or a toolkit or something along those lines. Further down, we have information about how different medical conditions can affect driving, such as vision disorders or driving after a stroke, medically at-risk driving and what that means. So there are a variety of different things, and this is a 2-page document that talks about all sorts of different resources that you might find helpful, either for yourself or for someone else that you care about as they look at developing their plan for the future. So I hope this has been helpful. And like I said, this is the first of 3 mini trainings that we have that we offer at Centralina. And I hope this is a great start as you seek to better understand some of the alternatives that are out there for driving. Thanks so much for joining us, and take care. Bye-bye.